Your goal while watching this video is to understand how to work with ratios and equivalent ratios to solve real-life problems. So first of all, two ratios that describe the same relationship are called equivalent ratios. So if I had the ratio of 1 tablespoon of powder to 8 fluid ounces, that's like about a cup of water, so 1 tablespoon of powder to 8 fluid ounces of water to make lemonade, an equivalent ratio to that would be 2 tablespoons of powder and 16 fluid ounces of water, or 2 cups of water. Okay, so these are equivalent ratios. They represent the same relationship, and this batch of lemonade would taste exactly the same as this batch of lemonade. To produce equivalent ratios, multiply or divide. So up here, we multiplied our amount of powder by 2. We double it, which is like timesing by 2, multiplying by 2. So then we also need to multiply our amount of water by 2. It's kind of common sense. However, a lot of people think you can add or subtract. So they'll say, okay, 1 tablespoon of powder and 8 fluid ounces of water make Country Time lemonade. So I want to make more. I have more people coming over. I want to make a bigger batch. So I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of powder. And they say, oh look, I added an extra one of these, so I should add an extra one of these. All right, so 8 fluid ounces plus 1, that'd be 9 fluid ounces, which means you're doubling the amount of powder, but you're barely increasing the amount of water at all. So that will make really, really strong lemonade. Maybe you like it that way, but it's not going to be the same tasting lemonade as the original recipe. So adding and subtracting do not work to create equivalent ratios. One way your book likes to show equivalent ratios is in a ratio table. So find the missing values in each ratio table, then write the equivalent ratio. So I always like to look in the ratio table. They should always give you one ratio. So they're saying pens to pencils, and there's one complete ratio here. There's 1 pen for every 3 pencils. Then we have 2 blanks to fill in. So let's start with this one right here. All right? So we're going to say, okay, what did they do to the number of pens? Because we know what they did, because there's a number for the amount of pens. We're missing the number of pencils, so we won't worry about that yet. What did they do to the number of pens? Remember, it has to be multiplying or dividing. They multiplied by 2. So then we also have to multiply by 2 our number of pencils and find out that this number in the box would be 6. All right, so the ratio 1 to 3 represents the same ratio as 2 to 6. Now, we have another box to fill in. All right, this last ratio, if you had 9 pencils, how many pens would there need to be? So now I'm going to focus on the bottom, and I'm going to say, okay, 6 to 9. Is it easy to multiply something by 6 and get 9? Not super easy. So let's back up and let's go to 3. Can I multiply 3 by something to get 9? Yeah, that one's really easy. I can take that times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So if I multiply this number of pencils by 3, I should multiply this number of pens by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. So that missing box would have 3. So when you are creating equivalent ratios, you are multiplying and dividing. Part B, dogs and cats. All right, so I'm just going to start with one of the empty boxes. I don't know how many dogs there would be if there's 12 cats. But if I look at this ratio that I already have where both parts are filled in, it's kind of like your base ratio, the one you'll keep going back to. Both parts are filled in, 4 dogs for every 6 cats. So I look and I say, okay, they had 6 cats, now they had 12. How did they do that by multiplying or dividing? Well, they multiplied by 2. So if they multiply the number of cats by 2, we need to multiply the number of dogs by 2 and get 8. Okay. Now, since I have a complete ratio for in both this row, or this column, and this column, I can use either one of those to get to here. And it doesn't really matter. Here you can do it a few ways. So I could go back to my very first ratio in the table, and I could say, okay, they had 4 dogs, now they have 24. How did they do that? They multiplied by 6. So what do I need to do to the number of cats? I need to multiply by 6 6 times 6 is 36. So I could do it that way. Or I could go from the second filled-in column of the table, and I'd say, all right, they went from 8 to 24. They had 8 dogs, now they have 24. They multiplied by 3. So what do I do? The number of dogs, or the number of cats, I multiply by 3 as well. 12 times 3, also 36. So either way, that will get you the correct answer. Here are just a few more examples. All right, real life problem. You are making sugar water for your hummingbird feeder. So hummingbirds will be attracted to feeders if they have mixtures of water and sugar. And depending on what season it is, or like how humid it is outside, you change the amounts of water and sugar, because sometimes they just really need the water, sometimes they really need that sugar for energy. So anyway, a website indicates to use 4 parts of water for every 1 part of sugar. So I'm going to use a ratio table for this. So the 2 things we have are water, and it doesn't say cups or anything like that, so we're just going to say parts, and sugar. And if it was cups, I'd write cups. If it was tablespoons, I'd write tablespoons, but it just says parts. Okay, so here's my ratio table. All right, so the first one it gives me says 4 parts of water. So I'm going to put that in the water row for every 1 part of sugar. Okay, so there's my first ratio. You use 20 cups of water. You don't want to use four parts of water. You want to use 20. So if I'm going to use 20 instead of 4, how do I make an equivalent ratio right here? A ratio here that's equivalent to this, where it's representing the same relationship. That hummingbird food will taste exactly the same in this recipe as it does here. So I look and I say, okay, we're missing this box. But up here, I have both boxes filled in. How did they get from 4 to 20? By multiplying or dividing. They multiplied by 5. So then I need to take my sugar and multiply that by 5 as well. 1 times 5 is 5. So then my question was actually, how much sugar do you need? My answer is right here. 5 parts, or 5 cups in this case,